welcome to Chore Chapters, because everyday tasks need good company. I'm Leo, and with me as always, we have got Luna.
Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well. Today we've got a thrilling and interesting story lined up, so grab your headphones and let's dive straight into the story.
All right then.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going into a really unsettling one, the long unsolved Keddie Cabin Murders. This happened back in April 1981 up in Keddie, California.
Yeah, it's a deeply disturbing case. And to help us sort of navigate the details, we've got some news articles from 2016 and 2018, plus a pretty comprehensive summary document. It pulls from, original reports and police files.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive is really to get a handle on the sequence of events, what happened in the initial investigation, who the main suspects were, and, the efforts decades later to try and find some answers. It's a really haunting case.
Absolutely. We'll focus a lot on the timeline and the evidence, the stuff that's really kept this case alive in the public mind for so long.
Right. So let's start with the setting. Keddie, where exactly is this?
Keddie's this small resort community nestled up in the Sierra Nevada mountains. It actually used to be quite prosperous, mining timber.
Okay.
But by 81, things were, on the decline. And Cabin 28, the scene of the crime, was right there in the Keddie resort.
And who was living there? Tell us about the family.
Right, so this was the Sharp family. Sue Sharp, she was a single mother. She'd moved to Keddie just the year before, in 1980, with her 5 kids.
5 kids, wow.
Yeah, trying to escape an abusive marriage, apparently.
Yeah.
The children were Sheila, who was 14, John was 15, Tina was 12, Rick was 10, and Greg was just 5 years old.
Such a range of ages. And there was another victim, too, right? Not part of the immediate family.
That's right. John's friend, Dana Wingate, he was 17, and he was staying over or visiting that weekend. Tragically, he was also killed.
So let's set the scene for the day before everything happened. April 11th, 1981. What was going on?
Well, it seemed like a pretty normal day, from all accounts. Sue, Sheila, and little Greg, they picked up John and Dana, who were hitchhiking nearby.
Hitchhiking, okay.
Yeah, they all went back to Keddie. Then later that evening, Sheila, the oldest girl, she went next door to Cabin 27 to spend the night with the Seabolt family.
And Tina, the 12-year-old.
Tina came back to Cabin 28 later that night. We don't know the exact time, but she was definitely back in the cabin.
Okay, so that sets up the night. Then comes the morning of April 12th.
Yeah, and this is when the horror is discovered. Around 8 a.m., Sheila returns from the Seabolt's cabin next door.
And she walks into
the living room and finds an absolutely horrific scene. Her mother, Sue, her brother, John, and his friend, Dana, they're all dead, brutally murdered.
Oh, my God.
They were bound with medical tape and electrical cords. And worse still, her younger sister, Tina, was gone, missing.
But the younger boys.
Incredibly, yes. The 2 youngest boys, Rick and Greg, and their friend Justin Smartt, who had also stayed the night they were found in a separate bedroom, physically unharmed.
Unharmed? How is that even possible, given what happened in the next room?
That's one of the biggest questions in this case. So Sheila, obviously traumatized, runs back to the Seabolt's cabin.
Understandably.
Then Jamie Seabolt, the neighbor, goes over to Cabin 28 to get the younger children out. Reports say he went in through the back door and saw part of the scene.
Right, which immediately makes you think about, crime scene contamination, doesn't it? Especially back then.
Exactly. Procedures might not have been what they are today. So the scene itself, investigators described it as incredibly violent.
What did they find? Weapons?
Yes. 2 bloodied knives and a hammer were found at the scene, and the blood spatter, it clearly indicated the attacks happened right there in the living room.
And the victims?
Yeah.
How are they found? The details are grim, I know, but important.
They are. Sue was found lying on her side. She was nude from the waist down, gagged with a blue bandana and her own underwear, which was secured with tape.
Just awful.
She'd been stabbed in the chest, her throat was slashed, and there was this distinct imprint on her head. It matched the butt of a Daisy 880 Powerline BB pellet rifle.
A BB rifle? That seems odd, alongside knives and a hammer.
It does.
Yeah.
John also had his throat slashed and suffered severe blunt force trauma to the head. Dana had multiple head injuries, signs of manual strangulation, and also blunt force trauma.
So different methods used on different victims, almost.
Pretty much. The autopsies confirmed it. Sue and John died from the combination of knife wounds and the blunt force trauma. Dana, though, died primarily from asphyxiation, the strangulation.
The variation is striking. Does that suggest more than one attacker, perhaps? or just extreme rage and chaos?
It certainly raises those possibilities. Multiple attackers, or perhaps the situation escalated wildly.
And what about outside the cabin? Any signs of a struggle getting in?
That's another strange thing. No signs of forced entry, no struggle outside. The family's pickup truck was parked normally, belongings weren't disturbed.
So it really looks like they knew their killer or killers let them in willingly.
That's the strong implication. There was even like a half-filled milk carton and an uneaten meal on the table. It suggests everything was interrupted very suddenly.
Okay, so the initial investigation kicks off. What are the first leads?
Well, they canvassed the neighbors, obviously. A couple in cabin 16, which was nearby, reported hearing muffled screaming.
When?
Around 1:50 a.m., that's potentially a crucial time frame for the attacks.
And what about the surviving boy, Justin Smartt, the one who was staying over?
His account was problematic. He was very young, of course. Initially, he said he'd just dreamed it all.
Dreamed it.
Yeah. But later, apparently under hypnosis, which is controversial in itself, he said he saw Sue, the mother, with two men he didn't know.
And this led to sketches.
It did. Composite sketches were made based on his description, but they were done by an amateur sketch artist, not a professional forensic artist. They depicted two men, maybe late 20s, early 30s, wearing sunglasses.
Sunglasses at night. And hypnosis plus an amateur sketch. Doesn't sound like the most reliable evidence.
No, you have to take it with a grain of salt, definitely. Investigators also looked into other rumors, drug deals gone wrong, even ritual sacrifice.
Ritual sacrifice, really?
Yeah, but the sheriff dismissed those pretty quickly. There was absolutely no drug paraphernalia, no illegal drugs found anywhere in the cabin.
So where did the investigation focus next?
It quickly zeroed in on people living nearby, specifically residents in cabin 26, right next door on the other side.
Cabin 26. Who was there?
A man named Marty Smartt, usually called Marty, and his friend, Boubede, known as Bo. Marty lived there with his wife Marilyn and her sons. Bo was just staying with them, sleeping on the couch.
Marty Smartt. Wasn't the last name of the boy Justin, who survived?
Yes. Justin was Marilyn's son, Marty's stepson, and Bo was Marty's friend who was visiting.
Okay, so a direct connection through the surviving boy. And what made them suspects?
Well, both Marty and Bo were known to be at the resort that night. Witnesses saw them leaving cabin 26 and returning late. Their proximity and timeline were suspicious.
Anything else?
Yes, something pretty significant. Marty Smartt told the investigators that he'd somehow lost a claw hammer around the time of the murders.
He lost a hammer, just when a bloody hammer was found at the crime scene.
Exactly. A blood-stained hammer and a hunting knife were recovered in cabin 28. And then decades later, in 2016,
What happened then?
a hammer matching the description Marty gave back in '81 was found in a dried-up pond near Keddie.
Wow. After all that time, that's huge. What else do we know about Marty Smartt?
Well, he was relatively new to the area, working as a cook at the hotel restaurant. And interestingly, the Sharps and the Smarts actually attended the same college class together. So they knew each other beyond just being neighbors.
Okay, what was his personality like? People must have had impressions.
Oh, definitely. And they weren't always positive. There were allegations he practiced throwing a hatchet, that he wanted to buy guns. Some described him as almost fanatical about other people's morals.
Sentimental.
Very. And there were serious reports of him being abusive towards his wife, Marilyn. Plus, rumors he was involved in dealing drugs, even making hashish. It paints a picture of someone potentially volatile, maybe controlling.
So what's the motive then? If Smartt and maybe Boubede were involved, why would they target the Sharps?
There are a couple of main theories pushed particularly by Mike Gamberg, the investigator who reopened the case later. One is that Sue Sharp was counseling Marilyn Smartt.
Counseling her about what?
About Marty's alleged abuse and maybe infidelity. Gamberg thought Marty, being possessive and jealous, might have gone over to cabin 28 to confront Sue about interfering.
Okay, that's plausible. What's the other theory?
The other one, also considered by Gamberg and some online sleuths, involves a possible affair between Sue Sharp and Marty Smartt himself.
An affair. So maybe it ended badly?
Yeah.
Or Sue threatened to expose it?
Possibly. Either way, the theory goes the confrontation turned violent, and John, Dana, and tragically Tina might have just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Witnesses who needed to be silenced.
Which brings us back to Tina. She was missing from the initial scene.
Right. Her disappearance was treated as a probable abduction. The FBI even got involved initially. But for 3 long years, there was just nothing. No sign of her.
3 years. That's agonizing for the family.
Unimaginable. Then in April 1984, actually, on the third anniversary of the murders, a bottle collector made a discovery.
What do they find?
Skeletal remains. A skull and part of a jawbone found way out at a place called Camp 18 near Feather Falls in Butte County. It's about 60, maybe 62 miles from Keddie.
And they were identified.
Yes, took a couple of months, but by June 1984, they were confirmed to be Tina Sharp's remains.
Finding her remains so far away, 3 years later, what did that do for the investigation? Did it provide new leads?
It confirmed her death, obviously, but the location didn't immediately crack the case open. But there was another weird twist.
What was that?
Shortly after the remains were found, the Butte County Sheriff's Office got an anonymous phone call. The caller apparently identified the remains as Tina's.
Before they were officially identified.
It seems so. The call wasn't properly documented at the time, but years later they actually found a tape recording of it buried in an evidence box.
Who would make that call? Someone with guilty knowledge, maybe? Or just someone who'd heard rumors?
Exactly. Why stay anonymous? It suggests knowledge that they didn't want traced back to them.
So time passes. What happens next in the case? Now they know the cabin itself is gone now.
Right. Cabin 28 was demolished back in 2004. But investigators kept digging, and some potentially crucial pieces of evidence surfaced later. One is this letter.
A letter?
Yeah, a letter Marty Smartt wrote to his wife, Marilyn, just weeks after the murders. He was in Klamath Falls, Oregon at the time.
And what did it say?
It's pretty chilling, honestly. It sounds angry and seems to directly reference the murders. He wrote something like, I've paid the price of your love, and now that I've bought it with 4 people's lives, you tell me we are through. Great. What else do you want?
4 people's lives? That's incredibly specific and damning. What did Marilyn say about it?
Apparently, when shown it years later, she said she didn't remember receiving it, but she did confirm it was definitely Marty's handwriting.
Wow. That seems like a confession almost.
It certainly reads that way. Then there's another alleged confession, this one's secondhand.
Right.
A therapist who had apparently treated Marty Smartt in Reno, Nevada, came forward at some point. This therapist claimed Marty confessed to killing Sue and Tina.
Sue and Tina specifically?
Yes. The therapist said Marty claimed he killed Tina because she had witnessed the initial murders and could identify him. But crucially, Marty supposedly denied killing John and Dana.
Denied killing the boys. So in that version, maybe Boubede killed them. Or someone else entirely. How reliable is a therapist's claim like that?
It's difficult to assess, isn't it? It wasn't a direct confession to police. There are confidentiality issues. But it's another piece of the puzzle pointing towards Smartt.
And then came the hammer discovery in 2016.
Right. The hammer found in the pond near the resort entrance, matching the description of the one Marty said he lost. That physical evidence, even after decades, could potentially yield forensic clues, maybe DNA.
Speaking of DNA, any breakthroughs there?
Well, in 2018, there were reports, quite significant reports, that a DNA profile had been recovered from a piece of the medical tape used to bind the victims.
Was there a match?
The report stated that this DNA profile allegedly matched a living suspect.
A living suspect. Not Smartt or Boubede, obviously, since they're deceased.
Correct. This points to someone else potentially involved, someone still alive who could, theoretically, face justice. The identity hasn't been publicly released, though.
That's a major development. Has it led anywhere concrete yet?
It's unclear how actively that lead is being pursued now or what came of it, but it shows the investigation wasn't entirely cold. Sheriff Hagwood had officially reopened the case back in 2013.
And he brought back an investigator.
Yes, Mike Gamberg, who had worked the case earlier. He came out of retirement, and many credit his renewed efforts, along with pressure from online communities and sleuths, for uncovering things like the letter and pushing for analysis of the hammer and DNA.
It sounds like Gamberg really poured a lot into it.
He really did. His work in those later years is seen as much more significant than much of the investigation in the decades prior. He even presented the case to the VDOC Society.
What's that?
They're this group of volunteer forensic experts, retired detectives, profilers. They analyze cold cases, offer insights, trying to get fresh eyes on old evidence.
So, despite Smartt and Boubede being the primary suspects for years, and both now deceased, the case is still officially unsolved.
That's right, officially unsolved. As of 2016, reports mention investigators were looking at about 6 potential persons of interest. Whether the DNA match relates to one of them, we don't know for sure.
It leaves so many questions hanging, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The core questions remain. Why Sue Sharp specifically? Was it the confrontation theory, the affair theory, or something else entirely? Who made that anonymous call about Tina's remains?
And what will the hammer finally tell us, if anything? Can they get viable DNA or other trace evidence off it after all this time in a pond?
That's the hope. And of course, the biggest question generated by recent developments. Who is the living suspect whose DNA allegedly matches the tape? And what is their connection to Smartt, Boubede, and the events of that night?
It's just a profound tragedy, the sheer brutality and the fact that decades later, there's still no definitive answer, no final justice for Sue, John, Dana, and Tina.
It really is. It casts a long shadow over the Keddie area, and obviously, for the surviving family members, the lack of closure is immensely painful. It's a stark reminder of how unsolved cases continue to wound communities.
As we wrap up this deep dive, it's clear this case is incredibly complex, full of disturbing details and frustrating dead ends. We really hope you, the listener, take away the persistence needed in these kinds of investigations.
And if, by some chance, anyone listening has any information, even something that seems small, the Plumas County Sheriff still has a hotline for this case. The number mentioned in articles is 283-6360.
Yeah, please call if you know anything.
Ultimately, despite all the leads, the potential confessions, the recovered evidence, the full story of what happened in Cabin 28 hasn't been told. It highlights that devastating impact of violence and, well, also the hope, however faint, that answers might still emerge.
Thanks so much for listening, everyone. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe. It really helps us out. Until next time, take care and keep your chores company.